Well, good morning, everyone. This is great. So, please, if you haven't gotten your coffee, please do so. We're here for a good time today. But welcome to 1 Million Cups, where we're trying to help connect the entrepreneurs in the area with people who want to support entrepreneurs in the area and just improve all of our own experiences. And so we're going to play a quick video from the Kauffman Foundation on 1 Million Cups and go from there. I'm Eric, by the way. I'm a community organizer. And also community organizers, we have Debbie, if you want to say hi.
Margo from WJOB.
And Jeff, Mr. Coffee himself in the back. So welcome.
Well, we should tell him everybody's traveling this week, too.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Traveling.
Mon's traveling, and Lori's traveling, and Ken's traveling, and Kim's traveling. Busy week. And actually, our guest, Chris, and we'll go into this, was also traveling to be up here. So looking for a good time. So we'll play this video.
1 Million Cups is a weekly educational program developed by the Kauffman Foundation. Over the years, we've added more cities. Great energy here to see what's happening across the country. What I've learned from other entrepreneurs is very, very valuable.
So yeah, our presenter today is actually going to be Chris, and once he's had enough coffee, we'll bring him on up and let him take over the show. So there are roughly 90 chapters across the U.S. right now, so trying to keep it an educational format. Yes, sir.
I'm a lot of a group, but I am also and have been all my life a community organizer in Whiting, Indiana.
Okay.
And I give tours.
Nice. Nice. Well, welcome. Okay, so
another coffee shop or bakery. But that's going to $25,000 plus us at the cost of the side.
okay. Well, that sounds great. Thanks. And just for since we're new into this process, so it's going to be a 6-minute presentation, and we ask that you hold the questions until the end, and then that way Chris can go through. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Good morning.
Good morning.
So my name is Chris Mormon, as Eric said, and I'm here to tell you about our company, Rubicon Agriculture. And we are a manufacturer of automated hydroponic growing facilities inside of upcycled 40-foot shipping containers. So quick overview, we're an Indiana C Corp. We've been in business since July of 2015. We are currently in the midst of our second round of fundraising. So we're looking for $750,000, of which we've actually gotten some commitments this week. So we're starting to put the fund back in fundraising. And the capital uses of that are going to be a key operations hire, expansion of our production capabilities, and operating capital for our sales channels. So right now in America, we've got a produce problem. Notably that most of our produce comes from the American West, which, as anyone who's been watching the news can tell you, is going through a systemic drought that shows no signs of alleviating. Currently, 52% of all fresh produce is coming out of California. That's a market value of roughly $60 billion a year. I was actually telling Eric before we got started here, within the 4 contiguous states, the state of Indiana, and I threw Wisconsin in there since they're just right up the road, over $20 billion worth of fresh produce is consumed annually, and almost all of that is trucked 1,500 miles. Anytime you're going to truck something that far, you're also going to have some serious losses. So up to 40% of all horticultural crops are lost in storage, transportation, and handling. That's also touching 7 different hands between the field and when it gets into your plate, or onto your plate in a restaurant, or into your hands at the grocery store. We think that hyperlocal is going to be the solution on that. And the local food movement has really expanded pretty rapidly over the past years. I believe we've got that stat on the next one, but it's gone from 1 to 7 billion over the past decade. So yeah, right now the indoor produce market as of 2013 was 555 million. That is estimated to be 9 billion by 2020. This is not without the tailwinds that we're getting out of California, where 22 cents out of every dollar you spend on produce is actually made up in labor costs. California just raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour, as well as took away the exemption for overtime labor. So now they're paying overtime on anything past 40 hours, whereas it used to be 50. This is going to end up hitting us in the wallets as we go to our grocery stores. So there's going to be a real need for a new solution. Also, demographically, we're hitting on a pretty different thing. Millennials are consuming about 20% more produce than any generation before us. So that's obviously going to expand the overall produce market as well. And that's something Rubicon really thinks that we can start to attack. So the AgroBox is data-driven ag. We have essentially taken automation manufacturing technology, shrunk it down, and put it into a box. So what that means for us is all of the growing done in our shipping containers is actually automated. From the time that seed goes in to the time that plant is harvested, all of the pH, dosing of nutrients, light, HVAC, we're actually controlling for 13 different parameters. And we are also not only controlling that on a minute second-by-second basis, we're actually gathering that data. And we really believe that by gathering that data, in the field, you're only going to have the abilities that you've got to control things. In the container, we really do kind of have godlike control of just about everything in that growing process. So we think that after we continue to get growing cycles, we're going to end up having what we call the best recipe for this type of kale or your Genovese red basil. And we think that's actually going to be even more yet another area of growth for us, as we can actually sell that data to people looking to do the large indoor vertical farms, like I think you guys have one over in Portage here. So this is a screenshot just to kind of get you acquainted with kind of the control we've got. This was from our R&D unit, which we actually built into 8 separate rooms, and we were actually controlling temperatures on 8 separate rooms, and we could actually have a variance of up to 15 degrees. Which is pretty unbelievable for anyone who's ever really operated any HVAC equipment. This is not just sticking your window unit on the back and hoping for the best. This is some pretty minute control. So we believe the AgroBox can be the farm next door. We believe that as the hyperlocal revolution continues, part of the deal with local food is here in the state of Indiana, we've really only got a 3-4 month growing cycle where you're going to be able to consume a lot of produce that's grown locally. With the AgroBox, we've got the same conditions in that AgroBox 365 days a year, and we really think that it can be servicing, a 3 to 5 to even 10-mile radius around that to give everybody that access to local foods. That is going to be kind of one of the big headwinds on the local food movement is, if I'm in Indiana, what am I doing for local food in December? And we really think that that's part of what we can do. Also, we believe we're going to get better pricing produce out of this. If you think about when you've got to chop something so that it doesn't rot by the time it gets here from California, you're actually taking away some of those finishing nutrients as well as some of that flavor when you're putting something into a truck for 3 to 4 days before it gets to your grocery store, where it could sit again for another 2 to 3 days. We think that by keeping this hyperlocal, we're going to end up with better tasting produce that's actually more nutritious. And also, our hands are yours. As I said, 7 hands is what it comes from the field to when it gets to your plate or into your hands at the grocery store, and we really think we can break that down. I mean, we're going to be able to give you a stack of data for everything that has touched that plant. People like to talk about organic, but unfortunately, I can really go out here and plant an organic field right next to a GM plant that's been spouting heavy metals and PCBs out for years, and as long as going forward I grow organically, I can still get that certification. That plant is going to suck some of those things out of the ground. Whereas we can say with absolute confidence, we know everything that seed is coming into contact with from the time that it's sprouted to the time it got to your hands. We really think that kind of transparency, especially in light of things like the Chipotle E. coli breakouts and the kind of temporary listeria outbreaks we've seen over the past couple of years, is going to be a real value proposition for the end users and end eaters of our produce. So development status, like I said, we got started about a year ago, and we developed our prototype in August of 2015. We then developed the control suite and had that pretty much locked in by October, and we recently sold our first unit, which is actually a modular classroom. We call it the L3 model. That's the Living Learning Lab. That's actually operating right now at a pretty innovative high school in Omaha, Nebraska, and we're really excited to see what those kids can do with it, because we really think that this can be the future of cross-disciplinary STEAM education. Purdue and I are trying to push STEAM instead of STEM because we really want to throw the ag in there. You know, as the obesity crisis has hit the state of Indiana, as well as the nation, we think a part of that is that people really don't understand where their food's coming from. We've got a lot of statistics out of some studies from Northern Iowa, as well as the University of Nebraska, that basically say that produce consumption doubles for school children who operate in school gardening programs as opposed to traditional nutrition education. That kind of puts us at the cornerstone of a lot of different things, whether we're educating a workforce, whether we are trying to combat childhood obesity, or whether we are building communities based around the autonomy over food supply that we really haven't had since probably World War II. Our revenue model is reasonably simple. We are a manufacturer of AgroBoxes. We've got about 37 grand of gross margin on an AgroBox sale, as well as a continuous service plan. So we're sending the disposables for the growing process. That would be the nutrients, the seeds, and the plugs to actually be able to grow all that, as well as providing that training and education piece. Our future model is going to be taking those controls that we have taken basically from a manufacturing facility and shrunk into the box and bringing them back into a larger manufacturing facility. We really think that we've got a great opportunity here to be the state-of-the-art control system for these vertical farms, as we really are about as scalable as possible. My engineers tell me that we can run 256 boxes off of one set of controls, so we can actually daisy chain these. But to be able to take that for a 20, 30,000 square foot facility, that's the kind of expertise that's going to be needed as America and the world moves more and more towards hydroponic production. So our go-to-market strategy, we're actually starting out in the education and zoo space. I'm actually going to be leaving here and hopefully signing our first deal with the Indianapolis Zoo today. We then want to move into multi-box growing co-ops. We have actually trademarked the term empowered produce, and we're excited about that because we really think that we can brand our produce differently than organic by saying, this is produce that's built in your community. It's not just fueling our bodies, it's also fueling the workforce and the sense of community that we've got in these areas. Past that, we're going to go into that controls consulting portion, as well as then move towards retail partnerships. I mean, imagine a Costco with 15 of these boxes going in back, and they're white labeling all of the produce as, what is it, Kirkland brand produce. You know, we really think that's a great option, and we could actually build production or show models so that they could put a 20-footer right there in the produce aisle so that people actually see how this thing is growing. That transparency is more and more important as our food supply is kind of come under some media scrutiny here as of late. Past that, we really want to move into the plant manufactured pharmaceutical space. We're pretty excited about that space, actually. I was in West Africa during the Ebola crisis, and the Ebola treatment that was developed was actually grown inside of tobacco plants, and then that tobacco plant was processed, and that's what ended up saving the, I believe, doctor and the nurse that came back from West Africa with Ebola, ended up saving their lives. There are going to be more and more plant manufactured pharmaceuticals here in the next generation, and with our unbelievable amount of control, we believe that we can actually get manufacturing good manufacturing process from the FDA and make a scalable model either for the small end research or for major production in these plant manufactured pharmaceuticals. We're very excited about that. And then as the cost of solar continues to do what basically these flat screen TVs have done over the past decade and comes towards us, we do want to start working on the S2 model, which is going to be our self-sustaining model. That would be ambient water capture as well as solar energy. I'm not going to say that we're here today, but that's something that we're looking at in the future as more and more people want green and want to go from there. We've got a couple of venture-backed comparables. One of them just went bankrupt, kind of from the scattershot approach of we don't know what we want to be, so we're going to throw money at all of it. But our other main competition is Freight Farms. They're out of Boston, and I'm a Colts fan. We don't lose to people from Boston. So, our management team, I'm president and kind of all parts non-engineering, and then I've got a crack team of engineers. So Jesse Robbins has actually been in advanced manufacturing with Caheen for the past 3 years. Eric Mormon is a Navy veteran, and he had a lot of closed-circuit water experience, and it turns out that pulling a nuclear reactor out of the middle of that and putting a plant in there is a little bit easier, so he's been pretty excited about that. He kind of leads our design, as well as Pat Robbins, who is kind of our HVAC environmental controls guru. We've got some advisors. Purdue University has been great in their support. We want to continue to increase that support as we want to push this as the next level of STEAM education, and we know that Mitch and Purdue really want that, so I hope he's listening. As well as an advisory board that includes Wall Street, a couple of successful tech exits, as well as a Rose Holman trustee. I mean, we do have to have more than one engineering school in Purdue. It's not just Purdue, I guess. And that's about it. So I guess we'll open it up for questions.
So how did you get started? So you based on some experience the Ebola crisis, but like, how did you get started with Rubicon? Like in your background?
So we've got the friendly story on this, but essentially I was living with Eric and Jesse, and engineers like to tinker. Eric went down to the basement and decided he wanted to start growing things hydroponically, and I said, we do have a great mother. We could not put her in the position of having 2 sons in prison, so we're going to grow legal things hydroponically. So Eric kind of started that, and about 2 days later, Jesse actually came back from the plant, and they were throwing out an old automation controller, and they were going to throw it in the dump. And Jesse just said, well, would you mind giving me a property pass for it? I've got a big barn. I might be able to automate something. So he brought that back, and within a couple of days, that was actually the Thursday before Memorial Day weekend, we actually said, all right, I came back from the race, and I said, well, boys, if I got you some money, can we start a business? And they said yes. So initially, we thought that we were going to go into the industrial space. That is a much larger capital raise, and with people without the proven track record in hydroponics, we said, okay, how can we go ahead and shrink that down and kind of get proof of concept? So we decided to build an 8-room shipping container to kind of prove out that we could grow and prove out that we could automate. In doing that, we realized we really enjoy building these shipping containers, and I thought we had a great opportunity across several different verticals to be able to put these shipping containers in more versatile areas than just industrial hydroponics. So we ended up kind of transitioning or pivoting early up in our business into the shipping container business.
Can you make sure that you repeat the question because we're live streaming and they can't hear what the question is?
Yep.
Before you answer, just make sure you repeat what the question is.
Yeah, no problem. So that question was kind of how we got started, so hopefully the answer kind of bore that out. Yeah.
What's the inside of this box look like?
Here, let me find a few pictures for us here. Okay, this was actually 16 days worth of growing in one of our R&D rooms. So it's pretty unbelievable the yields you get. We end up being about a third of the grow cycle of traditional outdoor. So for a head of lettuce, for instance, we're turning a head of lettuce over in about 25 days. This is actually the GIF of our control system, which I don't know if anyone can actually read that from out there, but this is kind of so that everyone can understand, what exactly we're looking at data-wise. Nope. Uh-oh. Hang on just a second. I might have to pull my computer up here and get a few more pictures off. Essentially, what it looks like on the inside is we've got, for the Max Hero unit, we've got racks of what is called NFT, which imagine basically a 3.5-inch gutter with a lid on top of it with a grow spot every 6 inches. Our educational unit, which we shipped out to Omaha, I got a lot of pictures of it here, and I'm sorry I neglected to put those into the presentation. Sorry, bear with me on the technical difficulties here.
How did you come up with your name? Or what does it mean? Does it have a meaning, or is it?
The engineers would say I'm a history nerd, and that's where we came up with the name. But we really saw this as, we're gonna end up producing more food over the next 40 years than we have in the last 800. We do think that we are crossing the Rubicon in that respect. California is not going to be able to continue to produce this. So if we're going to continue to eat fresh produce, we're going to have to come up with some other options. And we really thought that Rubicon kind of signified that and said, hey, we are at the point of no return at this point. So we need to make some new decisions. We need to have a different model going forward. Let me just pull these pictures up here.
How many square feet would you think the house would be, and how much energy would you use?
Essentially, it's the space of between 4 and 5 standard parking spots. So we're not talking anything huge there. It's 40 feet long by 8.5 feet wide by 9.5 feet high. Obviously, you'd want a little bit of a buffer around that. The energy consumption on this at Indianapolis rates of 10.5 cents per kilowatt hour, we're talking about $650 to $700 a month, kind of depending on the seasonality of that as well. If you need to put HVAC in, or heat or cool it. And yeah, hang on just a second. As soon as this gets copied, we'll have a few pictures up here for you. So with the Max Hero unit, we'd be looking at somewhere in the, I'm sorry, I should repeat the question. The question was how much produce is actually produced. In the max share unit, we'd be looking at about 600 to 625 heads of lettuce a week, or a commiserate amount of greens and herbs. No one really understands what 10 pounds of basil looks like until you have a trash bag full of it, so I usually use lettuce as kind of our sticking point there. Yep.
Well, I have a million questions. I think this is an awesome item here for communities, for individuals, whatever you want. For instance, do you think a Strax would be growing their own produce on the side, or Costco, that would be, you think that might happen too?
I'm sorry, do we think who will be growing?
Strax or Costco would grow their own?
I think as we continue to move closer and closer to the hyperlocal, and as the local food movement continues to gain some steam, I do believe that you're going to see more and more grocery stores go to that. I know I lived in Manhattan for several years, and I was having things that my parents would have run to the grocery store for 2-3 times a week, shipped directly to my place from Amazon. You know, your toilet paper and your coffee and things like that. Fresh produce is always going to be tough for somebody like Amazon to be able to do. And as we all know about the grocery industry, they're not making their money on the standard things they buy. They're really making their money trying to get you to buy an Us Weekly at the counter, or a pack of gum or whatever. So they really need to continue to drive traffic into their stores. We think that by providing incredibly fresh herbs, incredibly fresh greens, that we're actually going to be able to see more and more of that and kind of allow them to continue on that path.
And then I really like, I see that you and Rose Coleman are working together on this, Rose Coleman is wonderful as well. And the idea of organic, I like that you addressed that. And I do personally see some problems with that. For instance, I live in this industrial area, and I might plant some things in my garden, but I don't know what's falling on top of them at night, you know? It's hard for me to even clean my hands when I get out of the garden because of oil residue probably. So I like that, but how transparent would you be actually, like, in terms of nutrients? It's not soil, it's hydroponics.
Oh.
What, is there anything that is missing that would affect nutrient quality?
So the question is there anything in our process that would affect nutrient quality? Frankly, no. We can be certified organic. The hydroponic industry is currently tussling with the USDA on that front. We're basically putting in component nutrients. You know, we're putting in direct NPK, no pesticides and no herbicides because we are controlling everything within the box. I think that when people talk about organic, that's really what they're thinking. They're thinking, you know, what artificial chemicals were put on this? We are putting component nutrients in, which can be organic or cannot be organic. But to me, you're not getting, you know, we're not putting anything on there that was meant to kill something, which is what I think most people are thinking. When I get organic, do I want something that's been sprayed down that's supposed to kill bugs, or supposed to kill fungus, or supposed to kill weeds?
I guess it's more, it's deeper than that. It's like some chemical that is not, that is foreign to the body, to the human body, that who knows what it does when it gets there. You know?
Well, I would say that nitrogen, potassium, and calcium are pretty much what we're made of. So I think that, you know, we are putting in those, you know, more or less the periodic table of elements as opposed to a synthesized chemical.
I totally like that. Great.
So this is actually about a week after we started growing in the Omaha container. So this is the school unit. So we kind of built this as a modular classroom, which actually, here, let me, it's always tough to get the right angle on this. Yep. Just because when it's 40 feet, it seems like it's forever far away. This is basically the rendering of the unit we built. And then what it actually looks like in real life is coming down from that end. These are what we're calling ebb and flow trays. So essentially you're pumping water up into them and then on about 4 times an hour and then pulling it back out. As that water pulls out, it creates a vacuum that actually pulls fresh oxygen down to the roots. And then we've got the sprouter over there. They're a little tough to see, but over here on the left you can see the vertical towers, and things are just barely sprouting out of them, so it's a little tough to see. And then down here at the end, you've got your NFT channels, as well as this is our control unit, the integrated control system. So I'm not sure what other picture. This is actually where we're currently building them. That was our R&D container right there, which we are properly embarrassed by at this point, but they always say as an entrepreneur, if you're not embarrassed of your first product, you weren't going fast enough. But we learned a lot in that box, and then we started working on with the insulated containers and kind of figured out the things we didn't know with that. So we were pretty excited.
Yeah, it seems like you, at least to me from your presentation, that you really either have 3 separate businesses or you have 3 revenue streams. The one I see is hardware/process.
Yep.
The other is service, right? And the third is data. Okay, because you said a moment ago that you would be gathering data, and so my question is, what portion of those revenue streams do you account for? In other words, what percent of your revenue streams would be in selling data? What would be in service? What portion of your revenue stream would be in the actual hardware and process?
Okay, so the question is, essentially we've got 3 distinct revenue streams. We've got manufacturing, we've got service, and we've got data. Right now we are concentrated on being a manufacturer. The only way we're going to get that data, get to that third piece, is going to be by having grow cycles in our container going through our integrated control system. So we are full stop concentrated on the manufacturing piece at the moment. With that manufacturing piece, that's obviously going to lend itself to the service piece as well. The more you got in the field, the more they're going to need serviced. Although, given the fact that the integrated control system can actually, you probably can't see it, but we've actually got status lights as you walk in, which double as our light switches, where if there's anything out of bounds on that, if it's out of bounds but not a crisis, that will be yellow when you walk in. If all things are good, that's green when you walk in. And if we've actually got something leaking or we've got level detectors saying, hey, we've got a problem here, that's going to be red, and we can actually go ahead and force a message to your integrated control system so that you can see that. So service is obviously going to be an issue, as anything is, but we don't see that as a large portion of the revenue stream. We just see that kind of as an ancillary portion. That data piece kind of remains to be seen. Depending on the crops grown and depending on how the hydroponic wave really takes shape, we are going to kind of ascertain where our portion of that data is. But we really think that because we're going to have that data handy, we're going to be able to say, let's say you wanted to go buy a facility here to a 40,000 square foot vertical farm. That's great. Probably a $5 million investment or more, depending on who your lighting provider is. We can actually come in there and say, hey, listen, here's how everything needs to be grown, and we can actually be the integrator for that system as well as bring our system in. So we've got these grow cycles built under a certain set of parameters. Here we go. Let's go ahead and build you the facility you need or design that facility you need, as well as just straight up selling it. I think that if you've got the perfect recipe for a varietal of Genovese red basil, you say, listen, we can get 15% more than anybody else is out of it. There's going to be value in that, depending on the revenues of these verticals. But the hydroponic industry at the moment is a little fragmented, and it remains to be seen exactly what the overall answer is going to be. So we think that we've got a great way to make a beachhead with our manufactured product and kind of give ourselves some time while making a healthy profit to be able to see what the next layer of that hydroponics is and then be able to transition into that or stick with our manufactured unit. But we definitely wanted a surfboard on the great big wave.
I just wanted to follow up on that. I saw when you mentioned data that you could effectively sell or at least consult with other hydroponic manufacturers or other hydroponic organizations. I saw that as a huge value added because many of these other hydroponic farms may not be able to gather the data that you are going to be able to, and that's something that would be extremely valuable to them. And so that's why I mentioned the data. I thought the data was huge in my opinion.
Absolutely, and we're very excited about it. It's just a matter, it's a little tricky to put that on a pro forma at the moment because you're saying, I don't really know what it's going to be worth something to somebody. I do know that for a fact. We're going to have it, and that's a great thing. It's just a matter of figuring out how exactly that revenue model works. But I'm pretty confident that as long as you've got the data, we'll be able to figure out how to slice and dice and sell it.
With your main emphasis being manufacturing, and this is Mont's question, he sent it in.
Hi, Mont.
Have you met with any of the Indiana RV manufacturers to help, to see what you can learn and to develop either a scale or diversity piece, just from like the modular nature of the RV manufacturers in northern Indiana?
We have, and actually we talked to their representative, Representative Walorski as well, because I thought that she'd probably appreciate any jobs if we could push them up there. Right now we are planning on manufacturing in-house, but we're obviously developing best practices from anything we can learn.
Yeah.
But I think that, at the moment, we've kind of got our process. But, learning things like an insulated container compared to the uninsulated container we used for the first one, that was a light year step for us, because we were going to end up spending, I think it was going to be $5,000 to insulate a box with closed cell insulation, and then still have to put some sort of a housing on it, or some sort of a wall and a floor on it. Whereas as soon as we got into the insulated box game, we said, oh boy, we just cut our manufacturing process in half. So yeah, we are continuing to learn. Obviously, we're a little new at this, but I got 3 great engineers who grew up in manufacturing, as well as Eric and I's father has taken us to more manufacturing plants than I could possibly count. So we're definitely trying to learn anything we can from everybody we can, but we're excited about where we're at right now.
Have you done any studies on individual family sustainability? What sort of area would you need to take care of a single family with one of these? And would there be any interest in coming up with a smaller, much smaller house to serve a family?
That's a great question. So the question is basically the economics of an individual family, or how a box could be used for the produce of an individual family. Ironically, Eric got the idea for hydroponics when we went to a prepper convention. It was the best $7 worth of people watching you could possibly spend. Our box right now, with our control system, like I said, it's kind of a Corvette engine and a Yugo body, which is what is nice about being able to be scalable outside of the box, but it does kind of give us some limitations on being able to shrink it back down. There are some other people in the industry who are working on the more individual size things, whether that's the size of a dishwasher, or a laundry machine, that you'd be able to go pick your 3 heads of lettuce a week out of there, and away you go. I don't think that's a battle that we want to fight, and I think that watching Podponics kind of flame through their $15 million worth of venture raise, you do have to pick your fight in this, and I think we're very much on a box up level as opposed to a box down level. But that could change in the future. Being able to grow things hydroponically does give you a lot of opportunities. It's just a matter of trying to figure out where is my growth potential, and we really kind of see that being more in the workforce development, control side, into the industrial, industrial vertical farms.
You said you were meeting with the Indianapolis Zoo. How are you gonna? What are you gonna do with the zoo?
Well, no one thinks about it, but I was at my buddy's wedding over New Year's, and one of my other buddies had a new girlfriend. We were introducing ourselves over a couple of cocktails, and she said, well, what do you do? And I told her, and she said, well, I'm a zookeeper. I said, boy, I guess I knew there were zookeepers. I never actually thought I'd meet one, though. Turns out the Indianapolis Zoo goes through between 15 and 20,000 pounds of lettuce a year. I got some time to spend, I spent some time traveling around the world, and it turns out rhinoceroses do not walk up to an acre full of lettuce and just mow down rows. But lettuce is kind of the best imperfect substitute they can give. What we want to work with, and we think the zoo market's actually a huge one, because there's 298 zoos and zoos and animal reserves in the United States right now. I'm 95% sure on that stat. It's somewhere around 300. But we think it's a great opportunity to, number one, take our educational model and be able to make this about conservation. So, our max grow model takes over an acre's worth of growing potential and puts it into 340 square feet. So that's another acre that the California condor or whatever can be roaming around in California, as well as the fact that we're using between 8 and 10% of the water, and that's actually a number that's going to drop, of conventional agriculture. So that kind of goes into the zoo's conservation ethos, but it's also going to allow these kids to understand how things are grown. And we really kind of envision little Johnny being able to go up, pick a head of lettuce, and go feed it to a giraffe for $10 or whatever Dad's willing to pay. So we think it's going to be more of an educational exhibit where they're going to get some ancillary benefits of the produce grown in it, but more or less it's going to be an educational unit for the students to kind of have it as an exhibit that also feeds a little bit. If they want to buy a max grow, that's great. We can do that as well, but we've got this educational ethos right now, and I would love to see them get an L3 unit to kind of go from there. So we're really excited about getting into the zoo market, though, and we think that's going to be some great publicity for us.
What's the cost for an L3 unit?
An L3 unit is $75,000. So sticker shock gets people a little bit, but you'd actually be surprised when you're talking about building a classroom. $75,000 compared to what it costs to build a modular classroom really isn't too bad, and ours does a lot more than just hold a chalkboard.
2 questions. One, how much can it grow, and then how long would it take to regrow? And does the water work? I mean, is it recyclable water? I mean, where is it? Is there a tank? Is there?
Yeah. So let me see if I can find. Okay. So right here in the end process, you can actually. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was how much can it grow? So our max grow unit has up to 2,500 grow spots. So if you're growing lettuce, that's about a 24, 25-day grow cycle. So essentially, you'd be pulling off about 600 to 625 heads of lettuce a week. Obviously, you wouldn't want to just say, hey, we're going to grow everything to be picked on the 30th and then not have anything for the next 4 weeks. The water actually works depending, all of the water is recirculated. So in the NFT channels, it's essentially a passive trickle operation. So once it gets into the top of the channel, those are on a bias, and that water will trickle down through the roots, and the roots actually grow directly into the water. So when you think about the roots that you see if you went and picked up a corn plant today out in the field, those roots kind of have to go a lot of different directions because they've got to dig through a lot of things that aren't exactly those nutrients. Whereas our roots are growing directly into a nutrient-rich solution, so they don't have to waste that's why hydroponics grows so much faster. They don't have to waste the additional below-ground growing power and photosynthetic power. They can actually grow up on top because they're able to get all the nutrients they want. And essentially, the only limiting reagent at that point is either light or CO2. So that water recirculates, and right now, I think the NFT channels in Omaha, so that's 2 layers, and I think they go through about 6 gallons a week. And that's kind of dependent on the stage of the growth cycle as well, but on a blended average. We're talking awfully little for, what is that, about 128 growing spots for theirs. So.
Is that treated water? Is this treated yet? And also, what is the size of the lettuce compared to lettuce you harvest?
The question is that treated water, and what's the size of a lettuce? Really, the size of the lettuce is kind of dependent on what varietal you want to grow and how long you want to grow it for. Same varietal, I can grow the exact same head of lettuce without essentially any of the end rot or any of the transportation bang-ups getting it here. So that just depends on the varietal you want to grow and how long you'd like to grow it for. We're getting to full size. I've actually got a picture somewhere, but essentially about palm-sized heads of lettuce compared to a deck of cards. That was taking us about 18 days. And obviously, you get to kind of a geometric growth point after that. So we end up with about an 8 to 10 ounce head of lettuce after 25 days.
What do you mean a geometric growth point? If you let it go after 25 days, then what happens?
It could bolt to seed. Really, you're just not getting. When I say the geometric growth side, you've kind of got the point where you're building the infrastructure of a plant, where you're growing your roots, and you're getting out there. But then once you've got a certain point, and as you get to the point where you've got more leaves, obviously that's going to allow you to have more photosynthetic power and kind of go from there. So you definitely see like the hockey-shaped side of the growth cycle at some point. One day you'll just say, holy cow, these things seem like they doubled in size from yesterday because it's kind of built the infrastructure on the root side as well as on the light capture side.
What about the water
Water treatment, we are essentially, depending on what the pH of the water is when it's coming in, we're treating that with pH up, down, depending on kind of the varietal of crop you're trying to grow. But no, there's no special water treatment needed. Other than the nutrients that we're putting into it so that the plants have nutrients to grow off of. But
this is absolutely incredible. What is it that we in the community can do to help you?
Well, frankly, I would love to see the state of Indiana really kind of make a push for saying, what are we going to do for agriculture in the third century of Indiana's growth? I think that, like I said, $20 billion worth of produce is getting consumed in Indiana, the 4 states contiguous, and Wisconsin every year. Hydroponics is not going to grow your oranges. Hydroponics is not really, you shouldn't try and grow carrots in your hydroponics either. But there's a large addressable portion of that we think, we know is going to be grown somewhere because California, we're fighting a competitor that's out of water over the trench. And as anyone who's ever been in agriculture can tell you, if you don't have the water, you ain't going to grow anything. We really want the state of Indiana to make a commitment to saying, hey, we need the workforce ready for the future. Because if you think about trying to put something in Chicago compared to Gary or in Hammond, cost-wise, not even close. We've got a business-friendly state. What we need to do at this point is develop the workforce that is capable of being immediately plugged into that hydroponic facility, so that if you want to come build a $10 million vertical farm, you're going to build in Indiana and say, I'll service the Chicago market, or I'll service the Detroit market, or I'll service the Indianapolis market. We really think that Indiana's got an unbelievable opportunity, almost on the lines of the automotive industry in the early 1900s, where if we make a commitment and we dream some big dreams and we get our workforce ready, even if these people don't go into, even if you go to a community college and operate our box and don't end up getting into hydroponics, you know, this is manufacturing automation technology. Just having that familiarity puts you ready for a lot more jobs. This is data analysis. We all know that data analysis is another 21st century skill that we've got to have, otherwise we're going to be left behind. We really think that with our cross-disciplinary ability to facilitate growth in our hydroponic L3 chambers, that we can really do an awful lot of things, whether that's traditional agriculture, whether that's non-traditional agriculture. Sensors, I mean, the list of teachable things out of our L3 is pretty much endless. And we really want to see the state of Indiana make a push to say, we need these in high schools, we need these in community colleges, we need these at Purdue, we need these on the extension farms, because we need to get the technology that's currently being researched at the academic level into the field so that it can create economic growth here in the state of Indiana. I want Indiana to be the ones, but I guess as an entrepreneur, I'll go to Ohio if I have to. It just hurt me a little bit. So.
Awesome. Well, on behalf of everyone at 1 Million Cups, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you for having me.